from Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. This is the All Access Med School Admissions Podcast. Hello again, everybody. I'm your host, Christian Essman, and I'm the Senior Director of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Case Western. It's great to be with you again. Thanks for checking out my show. Couple updates here for you before we get into things. Talking application numbers. We are in the middle of a application cycle right now here in 2024 for 2025, and application numbers are up this year, quite a bit actually. Nationally, submitted applications are up around about 5%, and here at Case, our application numbers are up about 12%. In fact, we've set an all-time record number of applications received in the history of our school this year, and right now we're rocking at a little over 9,200. I do think we're going to exceed 9,300 when it's all said and done by the end of the cycle, but we'll see. Hey, and it's not just us either at Case. In talking with admissions friends of mine, we had a few admissions community calls over the last couple months, and many of them are seeing increases as well, anywhere from 5% up to 10 plus percent. So it's going around, and not sure why. There's always a couple theories. We're not sure if it's more people applying to medical school this year than in the past, or if it's applicants are adding more schools, they're applying to more schools than they have in the past. So we really won't have an answer to that question until the cycle wraps up and we get the data from the AAMC. So we'll see, but right now we're doing a lot of reading and a lot of, screening applications. So if you're waiting around out there to hear from us, it's probably because, one, it takes a long time to read applications, and two, we're buried in them. So please be patient with the schools you've applied to if you haven't heard anything yet. All right. Hey, speaking of the AAMC, I wanted to tell you about a really cool opportunity coming up in a few weeks here. The AAMC's annual conference is taking place in the second week of November, and it's in Atlanta, Georgia, and as a part of the conference, they always have an associated career fair. And so this fair is taking place on Saturday, November 9th. And it's not just a fair. In fact, it's a full day event where they have information sessions in the morning that are delivered by medical school admissions representatives from a variety of different med schools, where they discuss like the application process and how to navigate this career path. And then in the afternoon, there is the fair, and that goes from 1:30 to 4:30. And let me tell you, there is a long list of medical schools from across the country that will be there. Right now, I just did a quick count a little bit ago, right before I got on here, and there's approximately about 110 schools that are going to be there. Let me tell you, this is a rare opportunity to have this many medical schools under one roof. So if you're going to be, if you're in the Georgia or Atlanta area, come on down. If you're, Georgia or University of Georgia or Georgia Tech, Emory, Georgia State, Mercer, I can't think of other ones off the top of my head right now, or if you live in that area or you want to make a road trip, grab some pre-med friends and hop in the car and come on down. I can't emphasize enough what a great opportunity this is to come and talk to admissions people in person and hear about their school and get your questions answered, and to have a morning of information sessions that you can't really get in a lot of places in one day. So I'll be there. I'm going to be at the conference. In fact, I'll be moderating a session on preview with some other admissions friends, and I'll be at the fair too. So if you're coming that day, stop on by the Case Western table, say hi. I always love meeting listeners. So there you go. Mark your calendar, November 9th. And there's information in the show description with links to the conference and registration. And, the best thing, check it out. It's free. So no charge. So just get there. All right. Okay. Let's get to this one. Let's get into this one. All right. So truth be told, I've had this recording for a while, but this fall has been crazy busy. And so it's taken me longer than I would have liked to get this thing processed and out to you. So, all right, Christian, let's get on with it. Well, I am thrilled to introduce you to one of the most innovative new medical schools in the country, the Thomas F. Frist Jr. College of Medicine at Belmont University, and they're located in Nashville, Tennessee. Belmont's College of Medicine is dedicated to cultivating diverse physician leaders of character who embrace a whole person approach to healing within a community rooted in service learning and inspired by the love and grace of Christ. With a vision of shaping medicine through transformative whole person care, the Frist College of Medicine integrates a commitment to wellness and professional formation, ensuring that both students and patients are treated as whole people. United by core values like love learning, leading by serving, heal together in humility, and welcome difference, this school not only prepares future clinicians to be skilled and compassionate, but also to understand the broader socioeconomic and systemic factors that impact healthcare. So join me as we explore what makes Belmont's Frist College of Medicine a groundbreaking addition to medical education and a transformative place for potentially your journey into medicine. So to hear about this, I got a friend of mine named Dr. Caleb Marsh, who's going to be the other voice you're going to be hearing, who brings over 20 years of experience in health professions administration to this conversation. Dr. Marsh has held key roles as a health professions advisor at Baylor University, the University of Texas at Austin, and Temple University, as well as serving as the Director of Health Professions Advising at Southern Methodist University. He was also the admissions director for Temple University's postbaccalaureate pre-health program. And currently, Dr. Marsh is the director of Pathway Programs and Recruitment at the College of Medicine. So he continues to try to help shape the future of healthcare there. So you're going to hear a little bit about his travels and moving around and what's brought him to Nashville, Tennessee, and Belmont University's College of Medicine. So with that, let's just jump right into my conversation with Dr. Caleb Marsh. Hey, Dr. Marsh, great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me. Really excited to talk to you today about your new College of Medicine.
I'm really excited to be here and talk about the Thomas F. Frist Jr. College of Medicine here at Belmont University. You can call me Caleb, though. We don't have to be so formal, but I appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here and talk more.
Well, please call me Christian. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Well, listen, this is this is the first time I've interviewed a brand new school. So I think our conversation is going to be a little bit different than some of the structure I've had with some other medical schools. But before we get into those weeds, Nashville's not your hometown. And so you've been there, a couple years now? So yeah, that's how correct. Did you wind up? How did this fall into your lap?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a brief history about me. I actually started my career in higher education as a health professions advisor. So I started out talking to students about their goals and aspirations, helping them get to things like medical school, dental school, et cetera. I started out at my alma mater, Baylor University. I left there, went to University of Texas at Austin, became director of advising at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And then I moved halfway across the country to Philadelphia to start a new adventure as an advisor, but also doing admissions for a post-bac program. And that was a fantastic opportunity for me to learn both the admission side of things, the recruitment side of things, but also to be able to continue to work advising students, especially non-traditional students. So I really enjoyed that. But I had an opportunity to move back south a little bit closer to home. And when Nashville came calling here at the Frist College of Medicine, I thought this would be an incredible opportunity to move back south a little bit, but also to help start something new. Yeah. And I think that was probably the biggest hook, is to be very much on the ground floor of something brand new.
That's amazing. Yeah, it has to be really interesting to kind of see what you've gone through and building this really from essentially the ground up.
Yeah.
So how about What's your favorite barbecue? Texas barbecue or
yes, that's a little bit of a difference
scene.
Moving to Nashville, right? Yeah, I'm very partial to my Texas barbecue and brisket. So Nashville has some great barbecue, though.
I've been to a couple of them.
Yeah, it's not home, but it's still great. There's a lot of great places, and I think a lot of people kind of think of Nashville as like the honky tonks and the bars and the bachelorette parties, and that's true. Those are all things that are very much ingrained here in the culture of Nashville with country music. But there's a lot to offer in Nashville. It's a beautiful city, lots of outdoor parks and spaces, great places to go visit, some cool museums, but a lot of outdoor space. And so that's fun. Not to mention Middle Tennessee is just in general is a really pretty place. So
that's great.
Nashville's been good so far. Plenty to do, plenty to keep me entertained. And so it's been a good spot.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like I can tell you're happy and where you are right now. So that's great. Well, how about let's talk a little bit about start by some of these Frist firsts. What are some of the Frist firsts?
Yeah. I mean, if you start from the beginning, when I got here to Nashville to interview for the job, this medical school where I'm sitting in right now was a giant hole in the ground. So one of the Frist first was literally getting our building completed and built and moving in. We moved in April of this year in preparation for our first class of students. And so that's another first, those first 50 students that we had. So we had interview day firsts. We had a ribbon cutting to open the building as a first. We had our first white coat ceremony just a couple of weeks ago. So, there's a lot of these really amazing things that I think they're amazing for any student to take part in the things I just mentioned, but to be the first students, the first faculty, the first staff to do all that is such a cool thing. It feels like it always means a lot, but it really feels like it means more in these firsts. So those are just a few that I could think of and rattle off right away.
Gosh, that's so many things. I can just think of like the hole in the ground. And by the way, the building that I've seen that you have on your website, it looks spectacular.
It's stunning.
It looks so cool. I thought this is just a rendering, and the renderings look different than the real thing. The real thing looks like the rendering.
Yeah.
So listeners should go. Well, I'll have links to your website in the show descriptions, but the building's featured in there a few places, and it looks just stunning. So well done. Yeah,
and we had a tour just Monday. We started to offer tours of campus, and one of the ladies on the tour, one of the moms of the students who was there, said, "This just feels so homey." She said, "It feels like home," and I said, "That's amazing. We designed it that way. We wanted it to feel like a place that a student feels at home because med school's tough and it's hard. And if you can make it just a little more comfortable to do that in. So you're right. It not only is it stunning and beautiful, but it also we feel is a very comfortable, homey place for students to feel like they can tackle this pretty big task ahead of them.
What are a couple of things that stand out that makes it feel homey?
Yeah. So I think one of the coolest parts about it is that the architects did an incredible job of going out and looking at a ton of other medical schools and seeing what med schools did really well, seeing what maybe med schools could have improved upon. And so I think one of the things is we designed it with students in mind. So each space, there may be a space that is like a little nook where you can go and study by yourself. But then there are also various rooms that are set aside, conference rooms set aside where you can do group study if you would like. And everything in between, very small to medium to large study spaces that just feel very comfortable. They look inviting. They encourage you to go sit down in them. So I think that's the vibe she was picking up on as she was walking through. But it was just good to hear because we feel that way too. And for someone to see that and comment on it felt validating.
Yeah, it's working. Yeah, whatever the plans were from the architectural perspective, it's working. Oh, that's wonderful. So you mentioned you guys have your first class. How big was the first class?
Yeah. So this is a good common question that we get asked. Our first class, when you start something new, you want to kind of dip your toe in, right? So 50 students were in our first class. So it's a small class. Next year, not next year, this current cycle that we're in right now will be 50 students as well. And then our plans are to ratchet that up to 75 and then get to 100. And we want to stop at 100. So it's important for us to have those small class sizes. And even when we get quote unquote big, we still want to keep it manageable. The whole idea of taking care of our students, knowing who they are, having them not just be a number is important. So we wanted to keep that 100 limit. So that's nice.
Right. Yeah. So you have their next task is right in front of you right now to get the next class. So hopefully there's people that are listening to this, if they haven't checked off Belmont, it's not too late, because you can go in AMCAS at any time and you can add more schools, which we'll talk about your admissions process here in a few minutes, but it's not too late to add schools even after you've submitted your AMCAS application. So hopefully this will pique some interest and people will take a closer look and maybe add one more school to their list. So let's talk a little bit about the curriculum that you guys had designed. Tell me a little, what are some of the highlights that you like to share with people? What about what it looks like and how students interact and learn in it?
Sure. So I think some of the things that we find to be, in some ways, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. It's a systems-based approach. Your first couple of years are those basic science courses. We call that the foundational phase. Then you move into your clerkships. And then in your fourth year, we have your individualization phase, at which a student starts to really prep for residency. Right. But, and so there's a couple of things that I think we do that are interesting and very intentional to add to that. So one of the things that we have are called our social and spiritual foundations of health. This is more of a kind of the idea that you reflect on your own experiences and this experiences that you have in a clinic and the experiences that your patients have. And those things kind of relate to how you're going to provide care to a diverse population of students. So there's a lot of things kind of folded into that. And we call them threads because they're literally threaded throughout the curriculum: medical ethics, spirituality, health system science, health equity, advocacy, literacy, education, and anti-racism. So these are all things that at some point as a physician, you're going to run into that in addition to the basic sciences, in addition to the diagnoses. And we want to build that in. So you'll hear us talk a lot about this whole person approach to medicine. And this SSFH coursework really helps tie that whole person approach together. The other thing that we do that I think is cool is having a very early clinical exposure. You'll get to start. We have an incredible simulation lab on the third and fourth floor of our building, and we want students to start getting into that early. So they started week one, they're starting to have experiences in the sim lab, experiences working with the equipment and those kinds of things too. So
that's cool. Before we hit record, Caleb and I were talking about how our director of simulation just left Case Western, is now the director of simulation at Belmont. Like, oh, he's got 50,000 square feet of fun sim space there to play with. So we were sad to see that our director leave to go to you guys, but he's a gem. So I can imagine what that sim center looks like in order for Daniel to leave. So it's got to be something amazing. But I wanted to say something about the you mentioned a moment ago you'll hear a lot from your school say about treating the whole patient, and that I totally agree with, because in looking at your website and watching your YouTube videos, that is threaded throughout on not every page, but throughout the website. It sounds like it is a part of your mission. It's a part of what you're trying to do. And it doesn't sound like it's just talk. Yeah. And it's really part of how you're approaching education.
And I think it shows itself in two ways. One is how we're training our future physicians to treat their patients, right? I think that's the most upfront, in your face way that we can have our students be prepared to work with a whole person patient. But it's also on the other side, how we treat our students too, as whole people. So that's another thing that we hope comes through, is that not only is your patient not just a patient, they're a person, but our students aren't just students, they're also people too. So there's a lot of whole person interactions happening at our med school.
From the first 2 years, the foundational years, What's the general curricular structure like? Is it lecture, small group, hybrid of that? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, I think it's going to be any and all of these things. And I think this is an important time to also point out, given that we're brand new, how we teach today. Part of that whole person approach is listening to our students, getting feedback from them, find out what's working, find out what's not, and addressing that. So even things we talk about today in ways that our coursework is delivered may change down the road and may change within the week,
Yeah.
So I think this is an important part, but currently, yes, it's lectures. We have a beautiful learning theater, state of the art, but that learning theater is also designed to be set up not just for lectures, but also for small groups. The chairs literally turn around, and behind you, there's a small table.
Oh yeah.
That
nice.
You're now sitting with 8 people to have a small group discussion.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, there's flipped classroom components, as well as, each professor may have a different way that they want to deliver things, but there's pretty much any modality we can accommodate that and will accommodate that.
I remember when I first started at Case Western, I came in when they were doing a complete curricular redesign. So when I started here, the new curriculum was just on paper. They took the prior 4 years, kind of wadded it up and threw it away, and so to speak, and did a full redesign. And so I was recruiting my first class, like it was all on paper. And so I remember when that first class started, they're like, "Where are the guinea pigs?" And everybody, "No, you're the pioneers. You're going to help us, find the thing," just like you said, find the things that work really well and find some of the things that might want to, kind of reimagine or rethink, because we're doing it a different way. You guys are the users. And so we didn't see it that way, but now we can change tack now that you're here and giving us feedback. So it happens a lot of places. So it's not just, your brand new school, but this happens frequently when schools make transitions from one curricular design to another, and it's just the way it goes. But
exactly.
But it sounds like you're seeking a lot of feedback, and the students have a very valued voice in that process. So I like you said, I think it's fair to tell listeners that what you're hearing today might look a little different if they're applying next year or this year or the year following.
That's right.
When they get there. So how about a little bit, I don't want to get too far ahead, but about third year and fourth year, particularly third year when they do the clinical rotations. I think one thing I read, this is the third medical school in Nashville. We know that Vanderbilt's there and Mehary's not too far away. Where were your students? What's the plan for them to do their clinical rotations? Yeah,
we're very lucky here in Nashville to have a massive infrastructure that can actually support those 3 medical schools. And so we have our primary affiliate is going to be TriStar, which is an HCA hospital right here in Nashville. Centennial is one of our major city hospitals. It's a level 1 trauma center. There were already students from across the country from other schools coming here to do training. So it was a really natural connection to have them there. I want to make sure that, again, this is not a comprehensive list. I'm sure this list will also grow too. Mm-hmm. And many of these hospitals and systems probably won't mean anything to people that aren't from Nashville. But we also have Heritage Health, Siloam Health, Williamson Health, Tennessee Orthopedic Associates, as well as Brentwood Pediatrics. So there's a lot of places, and they're all very close. Now, our students will have opportunities to do away rotations and clerkships, but we wanted it to be all here and close, and really within, most of these places are going to be within 2 to 3, 4 miles of campus. So
not too far away.
Not at all. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a great plan. And then another question that usually comes up, and maybe you've heard this, is what about research opportunities?
Yep.
How are students participating or have the opportunity to participate in research?
I always say this is probably our biggest area for growth, both physically and, some of this is going to be physically. How much space do we have? What kind of labs can we accommodate? The great thing about our building is there's tons of what we're calling shell space in the building, unused, where labs are going to be set up as we hire faculty to stand those labs up, right? So some of the research opportunities here will be dictated by the faculty we hire that come in to do the research. So those are, that's always an opportunity for growth. But scholarly productivity is something that is really just built into what we do, and we want to encourage people to think critically, to solve problems, to embrace research. But I think it's important to know that if research isn't your thing, that's okay too. So we want to support that. And also some of this will be student driven. Students will come to us with ideas about, hey, this is something I want to learn. This is something I already had a previous research in. Can y'all help me grow this? Right. And we'll say, that's an incredible opportunity. Yeah. Let's do that. And especially if things line up. So I think without that institutional history of projects, of certain research projects happening, students are really going to be a huge driving force in that. But scholarly productivity is built into what we do and something that we do want to encourage.
Yeah, that's important too. Okay, so your students have been there. When did they start?
2 weeks ago. So we had orientation week before last. Last week was their first real week of class, and this is week 3 for them. So we are very, very early into
brand new. What have you? What's been kind of some of the early returns? What are you hearing from the first 50, just anecdotally, about their new home and their new experience there with you?
I think they all feel welcome. They all feel there's a certain type of camaraderie that they feel all being in this inaugural class. I think they're probably a little tired of some of us following them around, taking pictures and videos of them because they're the first and we've never had students. So we prompted them and said, hey, y'all are going to be our literal poster children for this school because we don't have students yet. But they've all embraced it. You can tell in week 2, the reality of what's happening is starting to set in. I think they're voicing that they're starting to feel stressed, that they're starting to feel like the weight of what's been set upon them is actually happening, which is good because that means that, as we said before, med school isn't easy. We can support you, we can help you, but I think they're starting to feel that weight. So, early indications are they're happy, they're healthy. That's important to us. And get back to me in a few weeks and or after the first year, get back to me and we'll see how they all panned out.
I will say, I can tell you're not kidding when you say you've been following them with cameras and video, or cameras and video cameras, because your Instagram account has been very active with all kinds of, here's the ribbon cutting, here's the white coat, and there's students, just kind of candid shots and stuff like that. I did like the pictures. I thought it was cool. Students who came from same colleges or rival colleges, and they're wearing like their college t-shirt or sweatshirt together. That was really cute. I like that.
Love that. It was hard getting the Duke folks and the UNC folks to decide to get their photo. And then the Penn Stater with the Ohio Stater, getting them, posed for that wasn't hard either. They jumped in and were ready to go. So it was fun. It was fun.
I did notice the UNC Duke one. That's one. I'm like, because there were people from Vanderbilt. And then the next picture was a person from UNC and Duke. And I thought, now we see where they're going. There's some of the rivals within the class. I thought that was really cute. You mentioned support, and what does the support look like? The student affairs piece look like for students?
I would say that of all the things that I feel most confident about here at the Frist College of Medicine, I mentioned things will change and things will adapt and grow. But I know one thing will not change, and it's our commitment to taking care of our students here. And so we have an incredible student affairs and diversity office here. And we have a director of student success programs who will help with things like your study skills, step prep. And those folks are already getting to work helping support our students. When we talk about whole person, this is part of their academic wellness, right? But we also have their physical wellness and their mental wellness. and Dr. Alex Atkinson, he's our director of student activities and wellness. He will help stand up all the student orgs and all the things that they can kind of start to do for fun, things that are outside of the academics to support them. So he will be encouraging them to stay mentally well and physically well. So there's a lot of people in place already, and we're still building out our team with coordinators and other support folks. But the plan is to continue to grow that as our class size grows. And so we have students, but it's there, and there is a commitment to it, which I think is really important when you're a student and you're applying to medical school and you're starting to talk to different schools. Ask about all those things because the curriculum, yes, it's important. Residency, getting there is important. All of those things are important, but how to get there and who's going to be supporting you along the way is equally, if not more important sometimes. And I may be a bit biased working in student affairs, but I think it's all part of that same engine to move you forward.
Absolutely. I mean, having those safety nets underneath you is essential. And a lot of medical schools, we have to have those things. I mean, it's a part of our accreditation process. Yes. So this is not just, Belmont has this and everybody else does it. I mean, and like you said, you're building out, adding people, but you only have 50 students to start off with. So you can start a little smaller and then continue to grow intentionally versus just, whipping out like tons of positions. You can grow intentionally and get the right people in place. But these are part of our accreditation standards that we have to support our students. And so it's very clear that you are already taking off, especially with the success. What was it? Director of Student Success. Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's amazing. So, all right. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and get into the admissions stuff.
Sure.
And I'd like to hear, given the kind of the whole patient, whole student mantra, what is there something or are there things that you value in what you're screening applicants? It's the classic question that when people walk up to your booth and say, well, what are you looking for in me? Yeah. How do you respond to something like that?
So I kind of look at that. Well, and you're exactly right. First of all, that whole person approach, and you hear this term thrown around so many times about holistic review of applicants.
Every person I interview brings this up.
Yeah. And if you can imagine, given that whole person approach is in our mission statement and our value statement, and folding that into our admissions process is important. And so one of the things we really want to make sure that we are is transparent about many, many things. So some of those metrics, we make our minimum screening metrics very clear, very upfront. We think they're very generous too. That gets you your foot in the door. And then we start to look for things too. And those are all of these are also on our website too. So I'll kind of just go down.
Yeah.
What one of the things is a dedication of service to others. So we want to make sure that that's a characteristic or a value that you demonstrate as an applicant, that you know how to solve problems and that you're curious and inquisitive. And I think that ties into kind of that earlier question you asked about, nowhere on a list of things that we're looking for will you see the word research mentioned. But I think that solving problems and being curious and inquisitive, it captures research too. It could capture some other things, but I think we're looking for problem solvers. And so if that's done through research, great. If that's done in other ways, that's also great. So we also want to build this diverse culture of inclusion. And so that, we're wanting to create diverse physician leaders. The way to do that is to find a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. And I think people kind of think of diversity as race and ethnicity. And yes, that's one component, but there's so many other components. We have, you mentioned it yourself, 35 different undergraduate institutions represented in our class.
Out of 50.
Of 50, right? Yeah. And from 13 different states across the country. So we're talking about geographic diversity, age diversity, diversity in educational backgrounds, many with advanced degrees. We have veterans. So, this is something that when we say whole person and holistic review, we mean it, and we feel like it's really reflected in our class. And so those are the things we're looking at. The last thing I'll mention, and I think this is important no matter where you go to med school, but your tolerance for ambiguity, you got to have that. But at a new medical school, you really have to have that, because as I mentioned, things are dynamic, things are changing, and we want active participants in that process. And if they're not tolerant of ambiguity, they may kind of take a step back from the challenge that is being part of an inaugural or even a second class at a medical school. So again, people that are academically prepared and people that are socially prepared, in a nutshell, are two really, really important things that we look for.
Yeah. One thing that I read about on your website is that part of the mission includes Christianity. What if my faith is not that of being a Christian? Are you open to other religious backgrounds?
It's a great question. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of that. Our Belmont University, if you're not familiar with Belmont University here in Nashville, which our med school is just like a block over from the main undergraduate campus, but Belmont is the largest ecumenical Christian institution in the country.
Wow.
However, to your question, you don't have to be a Christian to attend. You don't have to be a Christian to attend Belmont undergrad, and you definitely don't have to be so to attend our medical school. In fact, we're open to people of all religious backgrounds, all faith backgrounds, or of no faith background, if that's who you are. The main thing is we want people to be able to come here and be who they are, and practice their faith in the way that they want. And we want to support that. So I think this is very similar to what you may see at like a Jesuit institution, where there's a commitment to service, there's a commitment to people and helping others and being of service to others. That's the common thread. However you get there to us is fairly irrelevant.
Yeah, I'm thinking of schools, undergrads like Notre Dame. Yeah, probably one of those well-known Jesuit institutions, and those students really have service embedded kind of within their institution and their culture and stuff. So I totally understand what you're saying there. And you don't have to be Catholic or to go to Notre Dame. So
we have a remarkably diverse first class from that regard too. Lots of people of different faiths, backgrounds.
Is that something they have to indicate on the application?
No, that's a good question too. And nowhere will you be asked to profess anything or to. It's actually a stat that after we did it, I was like, man, I know we don't ask this, but I would just like to know, just for my own curiosity's sake, mainly for conversations like this. But maybe that's something we'll collect later. I don't know. Yeah,
because I know in AMCAS that's not a question that's asked, but I just didn't know if maybe on the secondary that was something that is asked to them, and the answer is no. So
in fact, our secondary. To that point, again, for transparency's sake, you probably saw this when looking around on our website. We just went ahead and put our secondaries on our website. Primarily because they're going to end up on some forum anyway. Right. If you're interested, and also students, and I think this is just good general advice for applying to med schools too, reading a school's supplemental or secondary questions really can give you a great insight into what that school is all about. And if you have access to them before, you may read the secondaries and go, I don't know, this school may not be for me. Or you may read it and go, oh, this is great. I can answer these questions and I can answer them, thoroughly. And so we wanted to give people opportunities for that too.
Yeah. We do the same thing. And they'll give people time if they're waiting for their application, their AMCAS to get verified. They're just kind of spinning their wheels. And they want to start getting a little ahead of the game a little bit, start drafting up some stuff. Do the same thing too.
A little pre-writing hurts no one, right?
Just starting to get something on paper. So, okay, let's dig into a little bit about your admissions process. Sure. What are some of the things that maybe, are there any specific experiences, let's say medically related experiences? Is this a kind of must have, like shadowing, medically related work, volunteering? Is this a must have kind of thing or nice to have?
Yeah, I think for us, and I would argue, I've been doing advising for a long time and prepping students a long time to go into the profession of medicine. I would say it's a must have, not just for us, but for any student. And primarily I say, the analogy I always use is like, if you say you want to be a race car driver, then I may start asking you some questions. Have you ever driven a car before? Have you ever ridden in a car before? Have you ever gone 100+ miles in a car before? And as you start to ramp those up, people start to say, oh, I may have needed to do some of these things. I'm not asking you to hop in a race car day one and win a race. I just want to know that you've been doing the things to prep yourself to get ready for that. And so I think students that start to figure out their why and start to be exposed to that, and not just processes, but the people, the team. One of the big things that we do here in the way we train our students, people may not be aware, but Belmont also has a nursing school, a physical therapy school, an occupational therapy school, a pharmacy school, and all of these folks are going to be trained together in an interdisciplinary way, because that's how you practice medicine.
Right.
And the earlier you can start learning how that team interacts, the better. So if you can start doing that as an undergrad, because you may also decide medicine isn't for me.
Right.
And if you can decide that as a sophomore in college or a junior in college, even better. Right.
Better to find out then than after your first day of med school and you go,
1,000%.
This may not be right.
So it's a must for us, for sure.
How about research experience? Since there's scholarly work, sounds like kind of baked in, or some scholarly activities baked into the curriculum, is research, whether it's basic science or clinical, or do you define it more broadly? Like if somebody has an honors thesis they've done or a capstone project, value there?
Yes. All of those things are valuable. If it's of value to you as an applicant, we find value in that too. And so if that research project is something you really enjoy, great, do it. If you're doing it just because you want to look good in the eyes of a medical school, don't do it. There's a lot of other things that you could do. But I don't want to keep anybody from doing research, but I also don't want to encourage someone who doesn't have an inclination toward research to go into that direction. So yeah, it's a nice to have, but not a must to have.
Would you say your admissions process is focusing on some of the AAMC competencies to help you arrive to these decisions? Are those tied into your holistic review process?
Definitely. I mean, I think they just recently made a new list of core competencies. They tinkered with them a little bit, but we adhere to that very closely. Those are all things that we know to be important and look for. And the AAMC also has that the attributes, metrics, and experiences chart too. We have our own version of that, but I think students can all think of this as different pieces of the pie and how to get to those as a whole applicant. Yep.
Yeah. We've at Case spent some time this summer kind of retooling some of our evaluation tools to more align with the competencies. But I when people see 17 competencies, for us anyway, it's not like we were like, let's look for all 17 at the screening stage. It's like we can find these 5, maybe through the screening stage. And then at interview, we can maybe look for these 3 or 4. And then, afterwards put it all together. So it's not, I think I don't want listeners to, because I'm going to put links to the EAM chart that you mentioned, experiences, attributes, and metrics, and the competencies again into the show description. It can look overwhelming and almost make you feel like I have to be all these things. Right. And the answer is no. Yeah. You don't have to. We're looking for different people. Everybody's different. So that's right. And everybody's at different stages in their lives. And so, I think it could look overwhelming to somebody if they don't. Yeah, understand.
I've had that same conversation with many an undergraduate prospective medical school student. It's going to look overwhelming when I show you this list, but don't be scared. We'll talk our way through it. And to your point, it's exactly right. In fact, when we brought our first class in, they all took some, a battery of different personality tests. I think they took like a Myers-Briggs test.
Oh yeah, cool.
And we put them all up on a slide. And you're right. To your point, there's so many different personalities that our students have, and they all bring something to the class. And I think that's what we're looking for. In addition, is how are all of these people going to fit together as a cohesive unit? I'm a huge sports fan, and I always think of this as like everybody has different positions, and they're all important to have. And not everybody, we don't need 50 quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to only have a few on our roster. There's a lot of other ways to make that happen. And I think the holistic review helps us get to that pretty easily.
Yeah. I think I like that analogy too, that you don't need 50 quarterbacks, because everybody wants to ask us, like, how do I stand out? Everybody stands out in different ways. You don't try to stand out as the quarterback. You can stand out as a reliable lineman,
1,000%.
Yeah. I mean, so,
and be a very much needed, reliable lineman, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed that you also require preview. That's the AAMC's situational judgment test. Could you explain how that's used in your process?
It's one of many metrics and kind of data points that we use to evaluate an applicant. I don't know if it's any more or less important than any other one particular factor. If there was I think you probably noticed on our website, we're very transparent about a lot of stuff. I think if there was preview is worth 12.75% of your total, we would just make that available to people, but it's not. And to your point, everybody presents themselves in different ways as a prospective medical school student. And that preview may make someone stand out in a good way. Mm-hmm. And it may be a neutral value on another applicant, or it may, when coupled with other factors, help bolster something else up. It just depends. Yeah. So it just depends on the applicant. A 4.0 and a 528 on the MCAT, we may really be looking carefully at that preview just to see, like, are they just a robot that spits out very good grades too, or are they an actual caring, compassionate person too? So
right. Yeah, those unicorns.
Yeah, exactly.
What about let's see. Oh, I saw that this was interesting, that you have a hybrid GPA consideration. In the FAQ, it asks about, like, if I have my undergrad GPA and then let's say a post-bac or a master's program, how is that considered? And it said we do a hybrid GPA consideration.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that is near and dear to my heart, because having worked with post-bac students, I know there are some incredible gems out there who maybe just got off to a slow start. They didn't quite figure out school, or they might have been in an academic setting that wasn't healthy for them, or choosing a major that they didn't really like at the time, and they come back later and their last 60 credit hours are really strong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not even a post-bac student. Sometimes it's just a student who, if they're like me from a small rural town in Texas, that I wasn't really prepared for college. I got there and I struggled. I ended up, my third and fourth year of my undergraduate career look entirely different than my first and second year. Yeah. And so this gives us an opportunity to shed a light on that and allow students to stand out that maybe were late bloomers or maybe were post-bac students. And so the 3.0 still stands. We still need to have that AMCAS calculated 3.0 GPA. But I think that hybrid design that you talked about allows us to kind of look at imagine this as a whole person, as an individual. And if there are enough things in there that can grab our attention, it can be worthy. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I was just, as you were saying, I just think the other night we were around with my family sitting around the dinner table, and this came up, and my kids are in college, and like, you guys do not want to see my transcripts from college. Like, you're blowing me out of the water at this point. And they're like, really? And I just told them, like, hey, I got off to a rough start in college, just kind of like what you were saying. I came from a small town and I just wasn't as prepared. It took me a little while to find my feet. Yep. And, so I finally got my feet underneath me, and probably a good talking to from my parents.
Same. Yeah, this sounds very similar. We're
kind of cut from the same cloth.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Let's see. How about another question that I think people like to ask us? What if I've taken the MCAT more than once? When you're looking at this, how do you consider that?
I think this goes you can look at this in a couple of ways. One is, multiple instances of the MCAT in and of themselves to us aren't bad things. But we want to see that you've thought about it in a rational way, so that you didn't just rush into your next MCAT because you didn't get the score you wanted. Take some time. take some time to do some additional prep, even if it means perhaps delaying your application for a year. Nothing worse than seeing 3 MCAT scores all within 1 or 2 points of each other, and sometimes even going down, right?
Yeah.
But if we see you had a 497 the first time you took it, then you had a 509 the next time you took it, and maybe even took it again and got even higher, that tells a very different story than I made a 497, a 499, and then maybe a 499 again. Right. That's a very, very different story. And so I think what it allows us to do is look at each person individually, look at their story, show, are they using discernment in their preparation and in their timeline for application? But having multiple MCAT scores, I think once you get past 3, though, it can be problematic and not. I think even if a person could take some time away, maybe come back later, could be beneficial in those cases. It's not a closed door, but it can start to demonstrate some things. Mainly because you don't. Yeah.
I just had an email from somebody reached out to me the other day and said, I had a 516. I retook it because I was getting 520s on my practice test, and I got a 512 or 514. And should I retake it? And first of all, I said the third MCAT seems to be kind of a bar, kind of a threshold for med schools that I'm friends with or I know of. It seems to be people get a little nervous beyond 3 MCAT attempts. And I told him, like, I wish I would have got my hands on you after if you told me you were going to try to retake a 516, I would have said, why don't you let it apply and let it ride. I mean, maybe you'll get it. There's a pretty good chance you probably might get in. I don't know anything else about them, but versus trying to retake and get a 520 or, just the returns on that may not be as high as you hope.
Right.
So now they're looking at a third MCAT. And what would you have told that? I
think if this was a student who had come to me, like you said, I wish I would have been able to get to him, because I would have said, take that 516, put it on a shelf, and now start working on all the other things that you can work on to improve your application, because that to me is indicative of students that can not only get into med school, but get into some really great medical schools with that score. And I think I would have a conversation about what their school lists look like too, because that may be a different bar that they've set for themselves. But still a great score. And I'm with you. And I do hate to see it go down. I think this is also a good time to talk about how a student, when they're shopping around for med schools, to ask the question, do you use an average of our scores? Do we use the most recent score? Do we use the best score? We use the most recent MCAT score you have. So in the case of the example you said, we would use 512, but we would still see that they made a 516. However, we would use the 512 as our evaluative tool. So I think that's an important question, is if I'm an applicant, to ask that question to a med school too. Yeah.
That's a tough one. I also told him you're going to need to apply broadly in either situation. Whatever you decide to do, if you apply with the 514 or you retake, you're going to have to apply broadly, because you don't know how people are going to evaluate this. And
exactly.
I know that person's not the only one this has ever happened to them. So I know it's tough. It's tough.
It is tough.
All right. So we've gotten through, I think, what I felt were, but a little bit about your screening process, kind of the FAQs of your screening process. Let's talk a little bit about what your interview day looks like. It's on Zoom or it's virtual, but what can they expect on your interview days?
Yeah, I mean, we do our best to replicate kind of what you would experience on an in-person interview day. Everybody comes into a big Zoom room. I think most schools probably do it this way. You create some breakout rooms, and then the students come in, they get some Q&A, they get to meet everybody in their interview group. And then they break into 3 different groups, 2 of which go and interview with 2 different people. So you have 2 one-on-one interviews. One is open file, one is closed file, meaning that in one they have everything at their disposal, and in the other they have limited information about you. In general, though, both of them are just conversations. They just want to get to know you. They want to verify that you are who you say you are, and that everything in your lines up with you as a person. And then while those two groups are doing that, the other group stays. And this year we'll finally be able to have a student panel as part of our interview day. We didn't have that last year. So we hope to have a student panel as part of our interview day when we begin this year. So we'll see how that works. But that's kind of what students can expect. 3.5, 4 hours typically. Okay. Intro interviews. Those interviews are 30 minutes each. Then we close out the day answering any final questions, talking about next steps, and then we send everybody back on their way. And we feel like this virtual, and I think most people feel this way now. We love to have y'all here, especially as you mentioned, we've got this beautiful new campus, but it's just far more equitable and cost effective for everybody to do Zoom. How we supplement that, though, as most medical schools are now, is with a second look day. And we synced up one of our second look days this year with our ribbon cutting because we wanted our folks to be a part of that. But it gives you an opportunity, the second look day, it gives you an opportunity to come to Nashville, meet all of us, see the med school in a low stakes environment where you've already been accepted. So I know this is what a lot of schools are doing, but we find that model works well because we feel like if we can get y'all here, show you the building, get to meet us, then we put that decision in your hands. And hopefully you're an applicant who has multiple schools. And I tell this even on the road, and I'm recruiting for Frist College of Medicine, but I say, my goal is for you to get into med school. If it's here, that is incredible. If it's somewhere else, that is also incredible. So if they end up going to Case, amazing. You got into med school, mission accomplished. If that same student decides they want to come here, that's incredible and amazing too.
I totally agree. My hope is probably it sounds like Caleb, like yours is, hey, if you go someplace else, I just hope you had a good experience with us. And maybe you'll tell a couple of your friends who are going to be applying next year or in a couple of years that, hey, even though I didn't go there, I think you should check, this place out because I had a great experience, but for whatever variety of reasons, I decided to go someplace else. But that to me is good. And that's what I hope for on our days. Cause we just know we're not going to get everybody to come. Like it's the way the process works. But, what are some of those elements or things that you hope that an applicant can convey on their interview day, when they come to meet with you?
I think I mentioned one of these kind of briefly already, but authenticity, that they're real. That nothing is faked, that answers come not rehearsed, but from a place of them really knowing who they are and why they're doing what they want to do. The analogy I always use is it's like we've all done this, right? You go to the movie theater, you sit in the movie waiting for the movie that you're there to see to start, and you see these trailers, right? And you're with the person you're with, and you may whisper, "Oh, I can't wait to see that. That looks incredible." Or you go, "I don't know. I don't think I'm going to enjoy this." And so a student's application is their movie trailer. And so you want to see that and go, "I want to talk to this person." But just like a movie trailer, you want the movie to be good. So you don't want to see all the good parts in the app. You want there to still be some good parts of the student when they show up for interview day too. And so I think if they're authentic and they are who they say they are, the movie trailer will match the movie, and you get a good authentic experience where everybody enjoys the interview interaction. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I can give to any applicant to any medical school. I love that analogy because you see some of the trailers sometimes, and then you go see the movie. It's like, I already kind of knew the story from the trailer. And so my tip to applicants is often have other stories ready to talk about in your interview so that you're not reiterating all the stories. You may those may come up naturally, but if you have something new to share or different to share in the interview, it makes that interaction that much more interesting and the interviewers learn something new about you, about that story. That's a wonderful analogy. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And I think it lands with a lot of students because we've all been, like you said, we've all been in that scenario where we go, yeah, I want to see that. And I want every applicant to be, I want to see that kind of applicant. Yeah, that's great. So after the interview day, you all have admissions committee meetings and,
go back over all the evaluations. Is Belmont a school that does rolling admissions, or are you at a couple touch points throughout the cycle that you put out your acceptances?
Yeah, so rolling admissions is what we do. And so I think this is where we're going to see some big differences between last cycle to this cycle. Last cycle, we received our accreditation in October, and we turned on our AMCAS application in November when most schools are starting to close out their app cycle. So we went from November to February last year in this relatively short period of time. We still got a ton of applications, even in that
like over like 1,700 or something like that.
Yeah, very
it's crazy.
Good number of applicants. We've already exceeded that number this cycle, starting at the typical June 1st submission date. So, we know that this cycle is going to be different than last, just as far as sheer number of people for the same number of seats, and that will change. But rolling admission is the plan. We just think it's the best way to start to fill our class, and that's as students can expect. Our assistant dean for admissions, Jean Shelton, she says I over communicate with the students, and she does a really good job of walking them through every step and just making sure they know we've received their stuff, that they're good, and to head off as many questions at the pass as possible. But we will keep our applicants informed of each step along the way.
How about if you're put on the wait list or alternate list, however you define it, are you a school that prefers to hear any updates from them, or don't call us, we'll call you situation?
We will accept any and all supporting documentation, letters of interest, updates that a student wants. Those are they're accepted but not expected, if that makes sense. So we take them, but we don't need them or have to have them. I would encourage any student applying just to be respectful with that line of communication. If it's open, to remember to continue to be professional. Any interaction that you have with the admissions office is remembered, and they can be both good or bad. So just remember that when you're communicating with us or any other medical school in the country, just to remember that your professionalism doesn't end after your interview day is over. It continues until you end your career as a physician, right? Actually. So, but yes, we will gladly accept all of those. They are definitely accepted, but not expected.
I 100. I was nodding with enthusiasm. Caleb can see me, but nodding with enthusiasm through his whole couple lines there about being professional with those with whom you're interacting with throughout the entire process. I guess, is there anything else, Caleb, before we kind of wrap this up? I wanted to mention, you guys have something really cool that you do. Information sessions. Looks like they're about once a month ish. And so there looks like there's one in the end of August and another at the beginning of September, where they can go on your website and register for info session. What's that? I know it's an information session, but what does that entail? So there are two ways you can interact with us that I think are the best. So one is the one you mentioned, which is virtual information sessions. It's about an hour-long presentation. We talk about a lot of the things that you and I are discussing today, just to keep people in the know, let them know a little bit about who we are, what we're all about, get them involved, and then we stick around for as long as we need to answer any questions that these students may have. So we just try to be generous with our time. We usually have them in the evenings to accommodate work and school schedules. So just keep an eye out for those. We also, if you happen to be in Nashville, have just launched, we did our first one last week, our on-campus tours. So having you with a limited number of seats, or not seats, but spaces available for people to come and tour our medical school. And so if that's something that a student is here and ready to do and interested in, sign up for that. I think our first 3 were quote unquote sold out right away. Wow. So there's a lot of interest. I think people also just love to come to Nashville. So the virtual information sessions are cost effective, easy. You can hop on those. If you want to make a bigger commitment and can come to Nashville and take a tour, you're welcome to do that too. Oh, that's great. That's great. I like both those, and especially on your website, you can pick the dates that are available. So I'll put that in the show description too. Your guys' website is really well done. It's very clean and crisp, and like you said earlier, very transparent about exactly what you're looking for. And so I encourage people to spend a little bit of time going through their site because it is brand new too.
Yeah, thank you. Great. It's a good compliment. From somebody that looks at med school websites frequently, that's a great compliment. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean it. There's things in there like, oh, we should probably add this to our website. Okay, take some notes. Do you have any questions for me? I've been asking you all the questions here for a better part of 50 minutes.
Yeah.
What would you want to ask me?
I mean, I think one of the things that I love to ask colleagues, especially those that work at other medical schools, are, y'all have been around a while. You're established. I mean, Case Western is a very well-established medical school. What advice would a well-established medical school have to give to a new, maybe up-and-coming, brand new to the scene medical school? Any words of wisdom of advice to us over here in Nashville?
That's a really interesting question. I think you're doing what I probably would have said had you not mentioned it earlier, but is listen to your students as the users of what they think is working. Now, I do think there has to be a balance there because you have faculty and experts in curricular structure and design and basic science and clinical science experts who kind of know what they need to teach. But I think listening to student feedback it's instructive and can shape what your curriculum or what your school looks like a little bit. And then that also helps build a culture. And I think that's something that you're now starting to build with your first class is what's the culture of your school going to be? And that culture for me what are the behaviors? Culture for me comes from what are the behaviors of your school. So you said earlier that a mom said, this feels really kind of homey. And so it sounds like there's something already kind of brewing that there seems to be a family kind of feel there, that you've joined a family and it feels like the home that you're in. So I think that what do you want your culture to be? And again, it starts with your leadership and how they behave and what their expectations are. But that is something that resonates with me when I have applicants come to our school during our revisit weekends. That's something you miss, I think, a little bit on Zoom. It's hard to kind of get that feeling of what's the culture like there. And so hearing from current students and then coming and feeling the vibe and the energy in the building can help them see, like, does this feel like my home? And do I feel comfortable here? So I think that's what you're going to be building is what is our culture? What's our identity? What are we going to be known for?
That's great. I love that. So that's a huge takeaway for me and good things to remember. So yeah, thank you. That's wonderful.
I don't know where that came from. I just
imagine being authentic. That's where that came from. It's fantastic. I love that.
That was unscripted, folks. But no, that does. When I think about that, that's what really. That's the first thing that comes to mind is what's the culture and where are you going to be immersed in when you're there and how can you contribute to it? So
that's great.
Caleb, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of time with me. And I love, we got a time to kind of, when I talk here, to kind of divert a little bit to talk about maybe like an applicant situation. We talked about the MCAT stuff, and it's great to be able to bounce those kind of situations off people that we share similar backgrounds and experiences. So I really appreciate your time, man.
I appreciate you having me on the show, and I really love talking shop. So anytime. All right.
Well,
thank you.
It'll be great to have you back maybe in a couple years.
Love that.
To get an update. That's what I've been trying to do is maybe get some schools back, especially a brand new one. Like, hey, let's talk in a couple years here. Once you've had a couple classes come through, like, oh, this is what we're doing now. And this is how it was on paper. And then now it's kind of become live and it looks a little different today. So let's maybe plan on doing something like that down the road.
Count me in.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much, Caleb. Great to have you.
Thank you.
All episodes of this podcast are written, edited, engineered, produced, published, and lovingly obsessed over by yours truly. Thanks again for listening.